right, so everybody settled? Everybody good?
All right. Get off.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nate Ming. I am the marketing manager for Copic USA. This panel is called How Has Copic Affected Your Career? Just to confirm, that is, how has Copic affected your career, not how has COVID affected your career, which is a completely different topic and would not be able to be covered in 60 minutes. Let's introduce our guests. From the far end, we have Angela Sung.
Hey. Thank you.
Bryce Coe.
Hi, everybody.
And Shane Gallardo.
Hi.
Did I say your name correctly, Shane?
It's Gallardi.
Gallardi, I'm so sorry.
I'm difficult.
I added some flair on it.
Yeah.
I didn't roll the R. And our other special guest, the Copic 72-piece A sketch set, who is going home with one of you today.
Ooh.
Wow.
That was not on the planner. So,
Pick me.
real quick, yes, I am a troublemaker, and I'm amazed they put up with me. So, real quick, this panel, like I said, is how has Copic shaped your career? Now, something that I always bring up for a lot of you artists who are working here, if you want to work in art today, you have to have a digital skill set. You absolutely must understand how digital art works. However, traditional art is still very important, and a lot of those skills transfer over to digital art. Now, all three of our guests here are digital artists. They are extremely skilled, extremely stylish digital artists. You guys aren't used to somebody like gassing you up like this, are
Yeah,
you?
no.
Yeah, no, please don't
Okay,
look
I
at
have
me.
this job because I love art, okay? I have this job because I love art. I suck at drawing, but I love art. So, let's start with Angela. Where did your art journey start?
So it's kind of funny. I started doing art when I was in high school, but I found out about industrial design through Feng Zhu. So after I sent him a message because I was like, hey, Feng Zhu, I'm like a high school student. Do you think I could make a living doing art? And he said, yes. But then I then chose to follow his path. So I went into Art Center doing industrial design. And of course, I used Copic markers during my career. I was primarily a traditional artist. And then I had to use the skill set I got from that and transfer it into digital. But I think Copic markers really helped me in my early career days. So yeah, that's how I started.
All right. Bryce, what about you?
Ninja Turtles, X-Men, Dragon Ball, Final Fantasy, Metal Gear Solid, Capcom. Those are all the things that I drew as a kid just because you love these things, right? And so I always did it as a hobby, actually, until about 4 years ago. Prior to that, I had a career as a film editor. I was a reality TV for television, and then I worked in video games. And it was only after I had tried enough other careers that my parents semi-approved of that I went to the one that they said to never do, which is art. But I think because I kept it as a hobby ever since Ninja Turtles, I've kind of allowed myself to always just do it for fun and to experiment and to try things. And that's why I do use traditional art like Copic. After I finished that video game I mentioned, I started drawing more for fun. It got out there, and then people started wanting to hire me to do illustration, and now I'm fortunate enough. That's how I do what I do now.
All right. Yeah. I love that try and stop me energy now. Shane, what about you?
I've been drawing ever since I could pick up a pencil. I was raised as a welfare kid, so art supplies were very, very hard to come by, and I'm a big supporter of use what you got to do what you want. And so I would use whatever I had, school supplies that were left over and things like that. But when I was able to finally afford art supplies on my own, that's when I was all like, I need the Rolls Royce of art supplies, which is the Copic markers. Because I was all like, you see all the professional artists using it, and like in your head, especially when you're starting out, you're like, oh, that marker is gonna make my art look amazing, right? And I quickly learned, and after a lot of failed attempts, I was all like, okay, this is how you use the marker. This is how you use it to your advantage. But yeah, I grew up with traditional art. I would doodle everywhere that I can in the margins of pages, on the back of like stray cardboard that I would have. But yeah, like my art journey though has been like crazy all over the place. Like I have film, photo background, set design, costume design, like anything you could do. Like I like to think I'm a Renaissance artist, like one of those like, yeah, I could do it. You know, I just say yes to everything. And yeah, just drawing is one of those things I love doing. So I love using like quality materials for that. So
It's kind of cool being able to just like when someone asks you, can you try this? Having that willingness to just jump into it. And it also improves your skill set at the same time too. Because if you're not sure about something, like, okay, drawing cars is hard, right? Drawing cars is hard. But you'll probably have to at some point. Doesn't matter what project you're working on. So real quick, I do want to continue with you, Shane, on this. You were talking about, you know, the start of your journey and what kind of materials you were using, and I agree with using whatever you can get your hands on. But once you started getting Copic, which sets did you start off with? Like, what did you grab one at like individual markers? Did you get like one of the 6-piece sets? Where do you start off?
I am very picky, so I like to choose individual markers and kind of like build my own palette. I go based off of like gut instinct, like what's drawn to me, and that could be very seasonal, you know. So like it's like, oh, I like orange right now. I'm feeling like more like a mustardy yellow versus a lemony yellow, you know. I trust my instinct because ultimately it's an investment. Like you want to use that marker until it's like dried out. And so I feel like if you go with something that you emotionally respond to, you're going to be very happy with your purchase and you're going to keep using it in everything. It's like clothes. Like if you're going to spend money on top of a piece of wardrobe, you're going to work it into every outfit that you can because you spent money on it. So that's how I approach getting the markers. I love sets, but you know, I'm very much like when someone goes right, I go left kind of thing. So I like to be a rogue and like pick my own little sets there. So
What about you, Bryce?
So I got the 48 set, I think, when I was in high school as a gift. And I think, generally speaking, I just use what first gravitates towards me in the beginning. But then I think the fun part about using traditional is, you know, being forced to experiment. So I would use them up until one is dry, and then and then you move on to the next one, and you use up all of them until they're all dry. I still have that set that's completely busted, and it's frankly too annoying for me to refill them, so I just buy new ones aside from a handful. But I think that's, for me, the most valuable part about something like Copic, which is when you're forced to use those last remaining markers that you thought you hated because you're like, I never want to use this color, that you actually learn new color palettes. You know, like you find a way to make it work. So that's why actually the main place that I use these kind of markers is like figure drawing, where it's got to be fast. You don't have to labor over whether you think it's going to look good. You're just like, I need lines on the page. And I think that's where I find it most valuable too.
What about you, Angela?
Cool gray 1, 3, 5, 7, and black. Yeah, because I studied industrial design. I also really like Copic because you could refill it. So, but the nibs get kind of soft, so we could pull that out too, and that's the color I started off with.
Well, it's kind of nice that you bring up. So I noticed with Shane and Bryce, they use their markers till they run out, and Angela refills her markers.
Yeah, the markers are too expensive. I can't buy them again. So
That's the other thing too. So Copics are, in case you guys did not know, every Copic marker is refillable. Every Copic marker is customizable. There are different types of nibs available for different types of markers. So if for some reason you don't want a chisel tip on your marker, you can pop it out and put a different nib in. Sorry, 1 second. This wasn't even supposed to be my panel. This wasn't even supposed to be my con.
you're doing great.
But I love you guys. So you said industrial design. You've worked in film. You've worked in film as well? Yeah. So what led you guys to going to art? What made you take this turn and focus solely on doing what you enjoy?
Well, for me, like prior to doing illustration full time, I was a photographer, and I would do everything from fashion editorial to weddings and things like that, but mostly fashion editorial. And I got tired of waiting around for models and hair and makeup to finish and things like that. I was like, there must be an easier way for me to bring my visions to life. And so I was all like, well, I used to be an artist when I was a kid, and I was like, why don't I just focus on illustration? And so, yeah, I was like, and I just loved it because it's like, I'm able to do things. I'm not limited by silly things like gravity. I can make people float, I can make hair float, and I don't need to wait for hair and makeup anymore, and I can do things that I couldn't do in normal
You were talking about the
photography.
giant heads on your covers.
Yeah, like I love playing with like tropes, like comic book tropes and things like that. So yeah.
Bryce?
Just curious, is this camera working? This one here? It is. I'm just curious.
Yes. So what you can do is actually slide something underneath right here if you want to show it off.
It does not
Oh, here. Let's see.
That's much better. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason why I show that one is because right after I finished the game that I mentioned earlier and I was finally drawing for myself, I just needed a break. I was super burnt out after essentially crunching on a video game for 4.5 years. And so I was like, I want to draw for fun. And asked my wife, Lai, who's right over there. I said, Lai, I just want to draw something, like, what should I draw? And she said, just draw me a bunch of Psyducks. So, so I feel like I drew this specifically for her as like, just this is a joke. It's just for fun. It's not for anyone. It's not to sell, but it is, I think the thing that caught on because I was making something for a specific audience and I was, trying to essentially make her laugh. That's, I think, become kind of my recipe for when I make anything now, which is that I want to make something that both aesthetically now looks as busy and kind of complex as this, but also speaks to a specific story and to a person because I'm trying to capture a certain feeling. I'm trying to elicit, like in this case, like a laugh, and so that's how I feel like I've found the recipe for a lot of the work that I'm more known for, and it was purely from trying to make her laugh. So, yeah.
That's adorable. Oh my God. What about you, Angela?
I'm bad at math and science, so well, okay, that's one of the reasons. But I really liked games when I was younger, and I didn't know that you could do this growing up. So eventually, when the internet became a thing, I did a lot of research and found out that you could make this into a career. And art does pay pretty well, so you guys won't be starving artists, don't worry. And I don't know, it's just cool to create things and having people appreciate it, and then creating shows with all these different artists. So I think that's what made me decide to do this.
Let's stay on you for a second, Angela. With your current career, how often does traditional media, and by extension Copic, factor into your work?
Okay. Very rarely because we thumbnail. So I work in animation. I just finished on Bad Guys. And we did most of the things digitally, but actually my production designer used a lot of traditional media to sketch out thumbnails. So he would sometimes have an idea. He would sketch it out with like blue pencil and show it to us, and even using like some markers to indicate values, like foreground, middle ground, background. So maybe for me, I don't use it a lot, but production designers do quite use it.
All right, what about you, Bryce?
For most of my work, I like to go traditional first, so I'll do the line art, usually straight to pen, so not exactly Copic. But like I kind of alluded to earlier, I feel like I always want to create space for myself to have fun and experiment with different mediums. So I do still go to like figure drawing relatively often, and that's where I like to. I'll bust out watercolors, I'll bust out Copic, I'll bust out whatever it is, and I think it's the most fun part is that every once in a while you'll learn something in traditional that 100% informs what you plan to do in digital later. So I always like to go back and forth to kind of keep things fresh for myself, make it like interesting in and of itself. So I use it all the time still, and for my digital work, like I said, I always start traditional too.
Okay, and Shane?
For me, I guess I'll show some of my stuff here. I brought some samples. Ooh.
Oh.
Here's one of my thingies, my hostess poses. So my stuff is like inspired by like old school vintage comic books and things like that. And so I embrace the 2D flatness of it all. And so like my stuff, I start them as thumbnails and I color mock it up using traditional materials. That way I know what, I'm very much the type of person to hit the ground running. I'm a very efficient person, so I mock it up sometimes like, at my desk, and then I immediately know how to apply it to the final color. But then I also have a Patreon, and then I have a tier where people get custom commissions. And so that's what I use the traditional, the Copic markers for. I actually draw them commissions, and I ship it to them and stuff like that. So they get one-of-the-kind collectibles there. So that's kind of cool. I love that.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
Shane, did you go to an art-specific school?
No,
not?
I'm
Okay.
a art school dropout. So
Same,
there's hope for
same.
you.
Bryce?
No.
Angela?
I dropped out too.
Look at this, 4 art school dropouts in a row. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you are able to get the education, hang on to it, study it, cherish it, work as hard as you can, but also work on you. So, and that's coming from 4 art professionals. I cannot. So fun story. This is going to go on the video, and she's going to try and strangle me later, but it's going to be really, really funny. The person who was going to do this panel, she is a SCAD graduate, and she is an extremely talented artist. She is our education manager. She's really, really good at that. But I would love to have seen her face when she asks that question about their art education background, and every single one of them responds with my answer. Love it.
We don't have any college recruiters here, right?
That's a them problem. So I do want to check. So we've been talking about traditional media, and we've been talking about how, like, it's used to an extent in your current jobs. But I want to know, what traditional techniques do you take away when you decide to start working digitally? Like, what parts of that? We'll start with Shane.
Okay, so like I said, like my stuff is very like, inspired like old school comic books and things like that. So what I love to do, and I try to recreate the old school comic books. So I mock them up digitally sometimes. That way it saves me time going to the art store and picking which markers that I need. So I will, I'll mock it up very quickly on Photoshop or Procreate, and then I know which colors I want to pick when I go to the art store. And that helps me to not buy duplicate things too. I don't know if you're like me and you have bad memory and you're like, wait a minute, why am I picking up this pink again when I already have this at home? So it helps me to keep track and things like that. So that's how the digital applies, and I use them kind of conjointly.
All right, Bryce.
Yeah, so for my artwork, I feel like I focus a lot on the line art. So the line quality is something that I really care about. And part of that process when I draw traditionally is I usually use permanent media, so I can't erase. But I feel like the main thing that I'm training my brain to do when I do that is to put intention behind my lines, so that I make each one really convey as much volume or as much information as I can. And I mean, it's partially a trick for myself when I use traditional that I can't erase, so I really have to commit to what I'm doing. But what I find is by exercising that part of my brain and really understanding what I'm drawing, when it comes to digital, I can similarly still slow down and make similar lines that like convey that same information, that have that same intention behind them. The fact that I can press undo and erase and all that other stuff can kind of screw with it sometimes, which is why I still generally have a lot of traditional in my process. But learning to have your lines carry with them so much information is something that's really, I think, harder to do when you go pure digital and you don't ever have the stakes of making the lines really count and having them be as expressive as possible. So that's the very first lesson you'll learn if you ever decide to really hone your traditional skills. Is like that commitment and intention is so important. So yeah.
And Angela?
Okay, so I like to use a lot of gouache, and then I also use like a lot of markers. I think what's really cool about each one is the way they mix with the colors. So if you guys like get random colors, I think it's kind of cool to experiment and layer, like see how like the layering changes the color. And like what Bryce said, like you can't do undo, so it's gonna be, you have to make the decision and stick to it. And then I think that also translated into my digital paintings. I got a clear idea of how to mix colors, how to make things work together, even though sometimes they look weird alone. And I think I work with the weirdness now. Yeah.
That's actually a very good point of bringing up working with the weirdness. So with digital art, one of the biggest strengths that it has is the ability to undo. And to Bryce's point about how having that kind of confidence, or as Angela said, the decisiveness to say, I'm going to put down this line, I'm going to put down these colors. How did you develop that kind of artistic confidence? We'll start with Shane this time. How did you develop that kind of artistic confidence to be able to just like, because a lot of art, real quick, if you are a massive perfectionist and redraw the same thing over and over and over again to get it just right, raise your hand, please. That's it. Yeah, see, that's what I thought. Now, one of the toughest things about being an artist is knowing when not to do that.
Yeah.
And actually get the thing done. So
Yeah, honestly, the best way to build up your confidence is to work in traditional, because once you accept that it's on paper and you can't undo, it's going to make you a little bit more braver with your decisions, and it's going to make you a little bit more at peace with things too. Like, embrace that organicness. Like, nowadays we have filters and tools that simulate art effects, but like, if you embrace that the ink bleeds a little bit, and just appreciate the beauty of it, I think you'll be more at peace with things, and you'll start to notice the little special touches that traditional has, and apply that to your digital work too. But yeah, honestly, get confident with traditional, because that's going to apply to your digital stuff.
Bryce, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I feel like it's often really hard when I tell people that, like, a similar thing, and it's essentially you need to just be doing it. But I think the way that you can set yourself up for more success is by choosing the times and places in which you do that, by which I mean, like, if you have a place you can go and do figure drawing, there's that time constraint, right? Where you're just like, this drawing is going to be done in 5 minutes, whether you like it or not. And so a lot of times I think that takes away that like huge cloud of doubt that usually hangs over your head that's forcing you to like redraw a line a million times. And if you don't have like a figure drawing place that you like to go to, actually during pandemic, my wife and I did a Discord group called Nike, where every day someone basically put together a PowerPoint is all it was, where it might be photo references of a person next to photos of like random animals, and then you might have to like redraw the animal in the pose, those kind of fun exercises. And I think when it's on a time limit, that forces you to, it's not that you're confident, but it's that you're forced to make the decisions. And getting used to making the decisions, and it's going so fast that you don't have the time to press undo, even if you were doing digital, that can be a way to focus on fundamentals and force yourself to develop the instincts that you need to have lines that are confident, but mostly because you didn't have any time to do anything else. So yeah.
Angela, anything you want to add?
Yeah. So how do you guys feel about AI? Right? Like, so
Oh, boy.
It kind of looks all similar, right? When you guys see the stuff, it's not bad, but I think what makes us unique is the fact that we can make these mistakes and we can make the mistakes work. So just like adding on to what they both said, I think the imperfections is what makes us all unique, and I think embracing that will be your strongest point. So I don't know, when I first started doing art, I would be like, I want to draw like Craig Mullins. Like, he's still one of my idols, but I can never get my brush strokes to look exactly like his. But the way that you do things is just so unique. So just trust yourself and trust the process.
We're going to start with Bryce for this one. Now, we've been giving a lot of great advice to the audience, but Bryce, what advice would you give to young Bryce starting out with his art that you know now?
Wow, that's a really hard one. Can I pass?
You can pass for now. Think on that. We'll go with Shane.
Yeah. So question was, what
What
advice would I give?
advice would you give to young Shane starting out with art that you know now? Something you learned.
I mean, I would definitely say, like, keep all your action figures that you were going to sell, because they're going to be worth money. But I would say, like, don't be shy or embarrassed about the things that you love, because the things that you love as a kid is what's going to make you popular, and people are going to gravitate towards you when you're an adult. So, like, just be passionate about the stuff. Like, don't think like, oh, I'm weird because I like this cartoon, or oh, no one's going to like this. At the end, who cares? Draw what you love, draw what you're passionate about, because it's going to show in your work. you know, as opposed to someone hiring you to do this stuff. Like, if you draw what you're passionate about, it will show in your work more so than like a, you know, something that you don't like, you know.
Yeah. And Angela?
Well, I would just say to talk to each other more. Like, I feel like artists are all kind of awkward. I'm definitely really awkward. So just getting to know more people, exchanging ideas, not being afraid to like say, hey, do you have time to look at my work? Right now, you guys have like social media, Discord, and all that stuff. It's a really great way to connect and reach out to people. Try to build your social media presence too, because if you guys are looking to get into the industry, I think that's a really great way to get noticed. Because I was really against social media before. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that, but I think in the end it helped me a lot. So try to work on that. I think that's what I would tell the younger me.
Bryce, have you thought of it yet?
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I had the parents who were telling me like, don't become a starving artist, and I feel like that's pretty played out to talk about. But it is why I avoided art as a career until 4 years ago, because I just felt like there's just too much shame, you know what I mean? So that's the real answer, is that like I would want young Bryce to not have that shame and to know that it's totally possible to have kind of an amazing career as an artist that is, I have two sisters. One of them is a doctor. The other one is an engineer who codes, and it's possible for me to compete salary-wise with them. So that it's like, frankly, because my parents cared so much about finance being something that we're secure with, as a kid, I just thought that those things were completely not ever going to be similar. But knowing that it is, adds a lot of security and comfort. So that's what I might really share. Yeah.
Can I point out that we're all Asian, so we all totally relate to
No.
the whole parents
Yes.
and shame and
Did
things?
you know how many times I have had to explain to when my folks were happy with me when I became a pharmacy tech? And then I went and worked in anime after that. So that was way better and paid better. And I was like, hey, guess what? I told you so. Doesn't that feel good?
Right?
Yes. So that was all the questions that I have prepared. But do you have any questions for our artists? Come on up. Oh, here, actually, come on up to the mic right here. Sorry.
Okay. You gotta go to the. Nobody heard you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Actually, here, we'll make this easier.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yay.
Woo.
Mobility.
Like I said, I'm loud.
How did you get so buff, Miss?
You just lift weights, do squats. yeah.
Those
Thank
heavy,
you.
heavy Copics.
Yeah, heavy Copics.
Heavy Copics, man.
Changing out the nibs.
Buy more Copics.
The
Buy as many
72 pack.
Copics as you can afford.
The 72 pack.
Just
First of all, I have a question for you because I'm a pharmacy tech right now. Which pharmacy did you work at?
Which pharmacy?
That's my first question.
I worked at CVS it was Long's Drugs, and then CVS bought them. So that was like 8 years of my life. Oh, my God.
Wow.
I work at a Rite Aid, so I feel you. My other question is, how did you realize that working with Copics or just markers in general worked better for you than digital, or if there was any click that you guys had with traditional media in general?
Well, I love Copics because it's like, for me, what I love about art and stuff like that is because I used to work in a print shop, and so I love seeing the colors come together, like the cyan plates, the magenta, the yellow, and I love seeing the colors layer to form other colors. And so I try to recreate that in my traditional stuff whenever I do commissions. And Copics are one of the best ways because you can layer them. I love the beautiful way that they come together. So that's why I like that versus colored pencils. Colored pencils is for details, if I wanted to add some blush onto somebody or something like that. But Copics, a nice, quick, efficient way to cover a whole big area, mix colors, blend them, and they're quick to dry to the touch. You know, my nails look terrible because I didn't give them enough time to dry. Like, so that's why if these were Copics, they would be dry by now. They're not, so they look terrible.
The next product line is, yes, yeah.
1 second.
What's the wildest thing each of you drew with Copics?
Wildest.
Do you really want to know? Yeah.
You know what? This is a non-family panel. This is fine. I do not care. I have dark secrets in my commission history as well.
Oh, goodness.
Hit me.
Cars. I was just joking. It was just cars. Yeah.
Ooh.
Because cars have like really complex rendering, so I think like for me that was probably like the craziest thing I drew.
It's not wild per se, but the most vivid memory I have is I went to a convention myself once. Like I think it was Anime Expo, and it's around July 4th, right?
Yeah.
So the fireworks are going off when I was living near USC, and I did a piece that had fireworks in it, and it was just like the most like I don't know what like that just combination of the vibe.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah,
honestly.
it was kind of surreal feeling to feel that connection between the audio being real and what I was drawing. But then I think Copics happened to really lend themselves for that work as far as like small blending of the fireworks. So that was really fun. I don't know if it's very wild, but I remember that.
Shane?
For me, wow, I mean, you guys are really not wild. No,
The mildest
Very-
things
very
they
mild.
drew.
I'm very mild.
For me, like I had a Patreon commission where the same person every single month would request a different drag queen dressed as Harley Quinn doing the splits.
Hey, that's it's like the Wonder Bread guy. It's very, very specific.
Yeah, it's very specific.
I like how some of you got that joke.
Every single month, but I'm like, it's not that crazy because Harley Quinn is just red and black. You don't even do skin tones, so it's not that exciting, but it's wild as in weird. Like every person as Harley Quinn doing the splits. I'm like, you're paying me $30 a month.
They're building a
every
gallery.
month, so
Like,
cool.
hey, yeah, no complaints.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
This is a bit of a technical question, but how do you go about uploading your artworks, like through a scanner or a professional camera or just an iPhone?
I personally use a scanner. I used to have one of those like all-in-one. I think it was the brand was like HP and then Brother, but it's just too small because I tend to like to do larger work now. It's just frankly it's always better to do it larger as far as the fidelity and your own wrist movement with the drawing. So I eventually splurged. I think the brand is Optic, and it's like 11 by 17, so it's a lot larger than the standard like 8.5 by 11. It's kind of pricey, but the one that I got, I'm really happy with. So if you actually want to know the exact model, I can look it up later because I did a lot of research and scanners are expensive. They're really, really expensive. They can be like thousands of dollars for the 18 by 24 size, which is the largest thing I do traditionally. So yeah, that's a real question. Yeah.
For me, I love to just use my phone, and that's because if I worked hard on a physical piece of art, I like to show that it's a physical piece of art. So I like to have, the pencils, the markers, the erasers. Like I stage a whole scene just so no one knows that it's like drawn on the computer. I'm like, no, it actually exists in real life. It's a real thing. So I like to, reinforce that. So I use my phone and just take a nice picture for social because eventually it's going to go home with somebody that's like taking care of it. So.
I use the Epson V600. Yeah. That one's a pretty good one, but it's not like the big, large-scale scanners.
Yeah, the review said that one was a good one.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's like a 9 by 12 scanner, yeah, like a pretty normal
Yeah,
size
it's
one.
more-
yeah,
smaller.
Yeah,
it's a
okay.
smaller one.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes. Let's go down this line.
So with every new tool that you use, it takes time to like master. And I actually have never used Copic because I'm kind of scared of markers in general. So
Fair
how long did it take you to master like the use of them? Was it awkward at first or?
I don't know if I would say I'm a master of it, to be honest. I think it's just in my wheelhouse. Is one of the things I think is fun to draw with. And I think that for me, a lot of artwork you need to carve out different times for different types of artwork, right? Sometimes you're producing work, and work is where you often stick to your traditional wheelhouse of stuff that you know is going to perform. But I think you equally need to create space for yourself as an artist to experiment and to fail and to figure out new things where you don't feel like it has to perform. It doesn't have to like do well on Instagram or social media and impress people. Because I think only if you create that space for yourself will you allow yourself to grow and figure out new things that can eventually inform this side of it, right? So I'm not a master of Copic. I like to use, when they asked me to do this panel, I was like, I like using them. I'll talk about when I use them. But I would say for yourself with that question, just dive in and see if anything clicks with you. You don't have to get a giant, I mean, you could get a giant.
Today.
Maybe today you might. But yeah, just I'd say that's going to get you the most growth, which is probably what you all want, right? So.
Have you used markers before?
When I was a kid, and as soon as I got into adulthood and it looked terrible, I stopped using them.
Oh, okay. Well, I think if you just practice with the application that you like, because sometimes it looks streaky, sometimes it looks like it blends really well. But yeah, I feel like I'm not the master either, but I just really enjoy it. So just give yourself time to do it. I think you'll get it.
Yeah, don't be afraid to fail at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in general, but with everything.
So when you're using markers in traditional media, what do you like to use them on?
Like the paper or
Yeah,
okay.
paper. What's your medium?
I like Bristol, like a nice smooth vellum. Yeah,
Vellum
that's
is
the jam.
good.
That's
Vellum's
the
good,
jam.
yeah.
I like smooth. When there's too much grain, it can be annoying where I think with any kind of more wet medium, it might like flick onto a grain that you didn't want, and you're like, why is it sticking out? So smooth. I like smooth to start with, at least. Yeah.
Vellum and marker paper, great. Yeah.
Hi, I wanted to ask, what is your favorite medium to work with and why?
You want to start?
Okay, gouache and markers are both cool. I like gouache because it's easy to carry around, and then you get a lot of colors. But I bring markers too, so I could sketch out thumbnails, so I have a clear idea.
I think more recently, I actually prefer colored inks the most, as far as as far as it being exciting still. Like I think Copic and watercolor are kind of my comfort zone, but with colored ink, it's like can be insanely saturated, which is really not beginner friendly. So you take what I say with a grain of salt. But it's because it's so intense, it's really fun to nail right. But maybe I feel like literally Copic is the easy version in. So yeah.
In my artist fantasy, I would love to just have like a nice palette, watercolors, and paint in my leisure. But because I'm a working artist with not that much time, I need to carry around the Copic set to conventions that I'm at so I can do commissions. So Copics is the way to go for me.
I had another question about if you guys could do a short demo of how you use Copics, if you can.
Does anyone have any paper?
No.
No.
So here's what we can do. At the Copic booth, which you guys might have seen, we have this giant wall that people are drawing on. I've asked these three to do something on the wall. Come by early tomorrow if you can. Otherwise, you can see folks, or you can try the markers yourself at the Copic booth. We have a big wall. There is still some space left on it from what we have saved. Check out some markers. Try it out on the wall. Okay?
I'll just briefly say that if you're trying to like figure out how to use them for the first time, try doing an underdrawing in like a lighter tone color. And what's cool about it is that you can, if there's a bunch of mistakes, you draw over it with a slightly darker valued color, and you can essentially continue to do that, and each time fix mistakes that like gradually disappear as the darkest value comes to the fore. So if I were doing a demo, that's what I would show you. So yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Kind of a technical question. Sometimes I notice my marker gets a little gummy and a little shiny. Is that because my ink is starting to run really low and I didn't refill it? Or do I need a new nib? Have you guys ever experienced that?
That is a me question. So you said it's getting gummy. Is it developing like kind of little crystallized growths on it?
Well, they always get naturally out.
Eventually, yeah. So two things about Copic nibs, especially the super brush nib, which is far more fragile than it looks. You got to be kind of gentle with that. Some folks I'm seeing at the booth and at our wall are like jamming down on that thing. With a Copic nib, don't pull it off. Don't rip it off. Twist. Because if you pull it off, that's going to yank on it and cause the core to jerk a little bit, and that will spurt more ink out. So if there's too much ink on the nib, it will get kind of squishy and gummy. That's one thing that might lead to it. What's up?
Tell them you guys sell pincers to help.
Thank you, yes. We do sell tweezers, so you can pop your nib out. Give the core a little shake, and the excess ink might pop out, you know? Do it over like a paper towel, obviously. Don't do it over like a really nice tablecloth. But then pop that nib back in and slowly tilt the marker side to side to let it kind of readjust. Yeah.
What happens when the marker, as opposed to it being chewing or running, it just gets, like I have a R29,
Mm-hmm.
you know, used it the other day, it works perfectly. Then all of a sudden, you'll notice a week or so later, it starts to get kind of shiny and gummy, thick. It gets thicker, you know what I mean?
That can be one of two things. Either it is running out of ink or there is too much ink. So I'm going to be honest. Copics take a little bit of, they are kind of a living medium in the sense that they will do what they want when they want. And you have to like take control and make them yours. Mm-hmm. But part of the fun of it is kind of like if any of you build computers, or if any of you like to work with cars, you are working with something that you can adjust and customize to what you need. Now, your best friend as Copic maintenance, because not only am I the marketing guy, I am also the customer support guy. So your best friend is regular rubbing alcohol. Regular ass rubbing alcohol is your best friend. Get a regular eyedropper, put a few drops on your chisel tip on the broad nib, and then just kind of shake it out, and that should even things out. But if you have any problems, just email customer support, and you will receive a harried email from me maybe a week late. Any other questions? Yes.
Copic markers are great, but they are very expensive. How do you go choosing a color? Let's say I want to choose a purple. They have 20 types of purple. So how do you choose which one is best for you? I see they have 5 light ones, 5 dark ones, so I never know what to choose, and I can buy all of them. So.
Well, honestly, I mean, test them out in the art store. They usually have pieces of paper that are by it, and then test it out. If you're trying to pick which one to use in your current art that you're working on, my biggest tip is to make your own swatch book at home with all the markers that you own. Write out the codes and stuff like that.
We actually sell swatch cards now.
Oh, nice. That's a new thing. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, definitely if you can, swatch them out on the medium that you're using too, because sometimes the paper can affect, if it's an off-white versus like a bright white, it can affect how the color looks. But yeah, if you're in an art store and if you don't know what to choose, they usually have pieces of paper that are there, and you can just do a quick swash. Don't draw like a full masterpiece with it. Don't use up their markers, because then some poor person like me is gonna come by and think that's a full tank, and then be like, oh hey, someone's been testing this. But just pick and choose, and then go based off of instinct sometimes too. Like if you're feeling more like blue purple versus red purple, then go with that one.
So we do have a little bit of room for a few more questions, but I want to check with something with you guys. for this 72-piece set right here, do you guys want to leave it to chance, or do you want to fight for it? Because
what kind of fight?
Well, so no, what I'm gonna do when I say fight for it, this does not mean I'm gonna like football hawk it into the room and yell go. What I am going to do is I'm going to randomly choose. That's why I was counting everybody earlier. I'm gonna randomly choose 3 of you, and then we're going to do a trivia battle on Copic markers.
Oh my God.
You must answer me these questions 3, and whoever gets the most right at the end of it. Hopefully, we don't have to do tiebreakers. But whoever is most confident in raising their hands quickly and answering questions about Copic markers correctly. Do you guys want to leave it to chance, or do you want to fight for it? Let's do show of hands. First up.
Fight.
First up, who wants to leave it to chance? I am so disappointed
Come on,
in you guys.
guys.
Then in that case, I will do this now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Wait, are we counted too?
Yeah.
22. White sweater. Sit up. That's you. Yep. That's a shirt, not a sweater. Real quick, let me pass the mic down to you. What are you going to do with your new Copic 72-piece set?
So I've actually used Copic markers before, so I'm really excited because all of mine are like running out and very dry, and all I have is gray right now. So I'm very excited. Yeah.
Relatable. Yeah.
Anime Expo would have fought for it. Before we wrap up today, we have plenty of time left. We've got like 10 minutes left? Yeah, we got like 12 minutes left. Any more questions? Any more thoughts? Any more long rambling stories that don't go anywhere? I'm actually super grateful. Let's start with you. I'm super grateful that none of you have those things where it's like, it's actually more of a comment than a question.
Oh no.
When it comes to like perspective drawing, how do you do it traditionally? Because I know with digitally they have like those guidelines. So
That's an
I'm
Angela
wondering
question.
that.
You want
I guess what I do is like I just eyeball the vanishing points, and then I just make sure everything converges, but I set like a horizon line so I know that it should at least go towards one point, like one line. That's what I do for mine.
I mean, I think similarly, I think about whether it's going to be a 1-point or a 2-point, or usually 1 or 2-point perspective. And then I'm just making sure that as many objects that I put in the scene that have straight lines are pointing at that object, because it's like a simpler way to think about it. So if you're doing a box, that means like the top line that defines the top edge of the box is going to be pointing at that vanishing point, and so is the bottom line that's defining the bottom edge of the box is also pointing at that vanishing point. And as you add other objects in the scene, they're all doing the same thing. That's really all you have to think about to have it be consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you're drawing traditionally, like, angle your strokes towards that vanishing point, like kind of Bryce was saying, like, it really helps to reinforce that visually, and it helps to keep things a little bit more consistent. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
And we had another one back here.
Thank you. So normally when I draw, I just use pencils and graphite, and I'm trying to get into using color a little bit more. But either with markers or any other media that you use, how do you approach shading your art?
Shading stuff. I tend to use like colored pencils that way, or sometimes I use like a nice gray, whether it's cool or warm, if it's skin versus clothing. But I use that as like a nice shading stuff. But colored pencils is nice because it has that kind of like soft shading to it, can layer that too. But if I want that opaque shading, then I'll go with like a nice cool or warm gray, depending.
Yeah, so one of the things that I don't know how many people are familiar with my artwork, but I like to do something that's kind of like a CMYK approach. So actually, to a question earlier about which colors to choose, I personally like to choose the basic, cyan, magenta, yellow, and have fun with mixing those. And so when I do watercolor or ink or Copic, I might do an entire pass on the drawing that's all in cyan, another pass on top of that that's all in magenta, and and then yellow, and then by the end you're able to reach the entire color scheme. The reason I do that is because I like to think exclusively about the light and shadow all at once. So I'm not really worrying about the eventual hue of the color as I'm doing it. I'm able to just focus like, is the light coming from this direction? Will there be a shadow here? Well, where does the shade begin, essentially, right? So that's one method I personally like to do. It also makes choosing a color easier because I just pick the 3.
Thanks for coming.
For me, I think, do you guys know about warm and cool colors? Yeah, so do you guys know that within each color there's a warmer temperature and a cooler one? So I think I would just get like a warm and cool version of each color and then mix it, because that's what's cool about markers. If you're trying to get into it, you could just layer it and then just mix the cool and warm, and then it'll also add like the richness and value. And that's a good way to build up.
So also to both those points, actually all 3 of those points, it is one thing that's kind of cool is if you want something closer to that CMYK color scheme, we literally have a 6-piece set called Perfect Primaries that is 2 shades of red, 2 shades of blue, 2 shades of yellow that do match that scheme right there. And that's a really good place to start. We also have warm gray and cool gray sets and multi-liners as well if you want to use those for like fine lines or for larger areas of, so. It's much easier. I always recommend, like, people are always like, should I get the 72-piece set first? Not necessarily. If you want to, cool. You want to take that big swing, go for it. Either pick up individual colors or go with a 6-piece set. That's where you get started. And then if you like more, get more. Any other questions? One more? Sure.
So, you've mentioned layering a couple times. When it comes to traditional media that's like watercolor or markers or I think you mentioned gouache. I'm not saying I don't know if I pronounced it right, but when you're layering all these colors, does it work better to let the first layer dry first, or do you go in when it's still wet, or does it just depend on what you're trying to do?
It's totally dependent on the medium, but like I think watercolor you could layer. You could answer the watercolor one later.
Yeah, you can address the gouache. I think you're the more pro on that,
okay,
for
cool.
sure.
For gouache, it's cool because they're opaque, and then you can mix them together. So I often use like the complementary colors to get a nice gray, and then I add in warms and cools from there. But for gouache, I think it's better if you just mix it straight. But watercolors.
Yeah, it does depend on what you're aiming for. If you're purely going to do what I was just talking about, where it's like, one CMYK pass at a time, I think starting out, it's best to just let it dry, because then you won't have essentially things that mix that you didn't plan on mixing, because otherwise it'll start to shift over to any place that was previously wet. However, there are techniques that I think are super fun that are about doing wet on wet, and that's where the quality of the paper can really dictate how wet on wet will like bleed into different things. But I actually think it's super fun to do that, and that's where I was talking about earlier. Experiment with this stuff. So do a piece where you go for wet on wet, and you figure out how it works when you do it, and then do another method where you just let it dry, and that's where you're going to learn the most, and you'll be someone who can do both. Yeah.
Nothing for me. No, I mean, as someone who does like line art first and then color, I cannot stress enough to let your line art layer dry a lot. I've ruined some things where I'm all like, looks dry enough, and then I went in with a yellow marker, and then I've got this beautiful black streak going across my yellow. Yeah, I cannot stress enough, if you're doing line art then color, let that line art dry completely before going in with color.
All right. I think that's it. Everybody, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks, guys.
Before we go, real quick, Angela, where can we find you?
Ango the Mango on Instagram.
Bryce, where can we find you?
At Bryce Co-Draws.
Shane, where can we find you?
At Art by Shane.
I don't know if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, but it's Nate Ming. Easy to find. Nateming. Get ready for some shit posting. All right. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of the show.